She threw the test at the table in tears as the millionaire signed the divorce. What she revealed changed everything. Chloe Harper, a woman who once believed in love's promises, found herself at the edge of heartbreak. Her husband, Nathan Cole, a self-made billionaire, had long abandoned the simplicity of their shared dreams for the relentless demands of his empire. The home they had built together now felt more like a museum, beautiful but cold and lifeless. Chloe's voice trembled as she tried to reach him one last time, but Nathan's attention remained glued to his phone, his priorities elsewhere. The silence that followed was louder than words, echoing the rift that had grown between them. As the divorce papers lay on the glass table, Chloe's emotions boiled over. She had hoped this moment would force Nathan to confront what they were losing, but instead, it became a turning point for her. She slammed the pregnancy test onto the table, a small, undeniable symbol of a future he wouldn't even pause to consider. His reaction was colder than she expected, and with a single signature he walked out of her life, leaving her to pick up the pieces. Little did either of them know, that moment wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a story filled with regret, transformation, and the redemptive power of second chances. What would it take for Nathan to truly understand what he had lost? Could Chloe ever trust him again? And how would the life they unknowingly created shape their futures? Stay with us as we unravel a story that will pull at your heartstrings, one filled with love, loss, and the courage to rebuild. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us for more emotional journeys that inspire and move. Let's begin. Chloe sat at the edge of the dining table, her fingers trembling as she clutched the thin plastic stick that bore the news she hadn't planned to deliver this way. The room, grand and cold, mirrored the silence between her and Nathan. It was a mansion they had built together, filled with polished floors, vaulted ceilings, and rooms so empty they echoed, much like their marriage. Across the table, Nathan sat with his eyes glued to his phone, his shoulders rigid with the weight of a world she no longer felt part of. She tried to speak, her voice catching on the lump forming in her throat. Nathan. It was barely more than a whisper, but it was enough to make him glance up, his expression impassive. He placed the phone face down on the table and folded his hands, a signal that whatever she had to say, he was already impatient to hear it. "This isn't how I wanted to tell you," she started, her hands tightening around the pregnancy test. "But you're leaving me no choice." Her voice trembled, betraying the storm brewing inside her. For months, she had hoped for a sign from him, some indication that their love wasn't buried beneath the weight of his ambition, but his indifference now confirmed her deepest fears. Nathan leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. "Chloe, if this is about the divorce, I've already made my decision. We've been over this." His tone was clipped, his words slicing through her like a cold wind. She had heard that tone countless times in boardrooms and interviews, but never in their home, never directed at her. With a surge of emotion, Chloe rose, slamming the test onto the glass table. It echoed sharply in the vast room, and for the first time in years, Nathan's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "You've made your decision? You've already decided to walk away from us? Nathan, do you even realize what you're throwing away?" Her voice cracked, and tears streamed down her face, her strength faltering under the weight of her heartbreak. Nathan's gaze flicked to the test, its small, unmistakable plus sign staring back at him. Yet, instead of the recognition she had hoped for, his face hardened. He stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. "This doesn't change anything, Chloe," he said, his tone colder than ever. "We're toxic together. I'm doing what's best for both of us." Her heart shattered as he turned away, heading toward the study where his lawyer waited. She sank back into her chair, gripping the table as if it were the only thing anchoring her. "You don't even care, do you?" she whispered, though he was already out of earshot. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was louder than it should have been, final and unyielding. Chloe heard the muffled voices of Nathan and his lawyer discussing terms she had no input on, sealing the fate of a love she had once believed unbreakable. As he re-entered the room, holding the signed documents, he hesitated for a moment, his eyes meeting hers. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He placed the papers on the table without a word, picked up his phone, and walked out. Chloe stared at the documents, then at the test she had thrown down in desperation. She picked it up slowly, her tears falling onto the small plus sign. In that moment, she made a promise to herself and the child she carried. "You will never feel this kind of abandonment," she whispered, her voice trembling with determination. As the sound of Nathan's car fading into the distance filled the silence, Chloe stood, clutching the test to her chest. The house felt colder, emptier, and yet within her a spark of life flickered, a hope she clung to amidst the wreckage. Chloe woke to the sound of her daughter's laughter, filling the modest apartment, a stark contrast to the hollow silence of the mansion she had left behind. The cozy two-bedroom space smelled of freshly brewed coffee and pancakes sizzling on the stovetop. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, highlighting the small signs of a life rebuilt. Lily's drawings taped to the fridge, a well-worn sofa that sagged slightly in the middle, and a bookshelf stacked with second-hand novels. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, a haven she had created with love and sacrifice. As Lily darted past her, clutching a stuffed rabbit in one hand and a crayon in the other, Chloe marveled at the sheer energy her daughter possessed. Lily was her anchor, her reason to push through the exhaustion of juggling multiple jobs. Every morning, Chloe woke up with the determination to provide a life of joy and stability for her child, even if it meant forgoing luxuries and working late into the night. She often caught herself wondering how different things might have been if Nathan had cared enough to stay. But she always pushed the thought aside. Nathan's world, on the other hand, was a stark contrast. He stood on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking a sprawling cityscape of skyscrapers and bustling streets. The view was magnificent, the kind that screamed success, but it failed to fill the emptiness gnawing at him. The walls of his home were adorned with awards, photographs of corporate triumphs and evidence of a life driven by ambition. Yet, beneath the polished surface, he felt an ache he couldn't name, a void that success couldn't fill. His days were meticulously planned, filled with board meetings, investor calls, and press conferences. Nathan's public image was that of a titan, a man who had built an empire from the ground up. But in the quiet moments, when the noise of the world subsided, he found himself haunted by the memory of Chloe's tear-streaked face and the test she had slammed onto the table. He told himself he had made the right choice, that his life was better without the chaos of a failing marriage, yet doubt lingered like an unwelcome guest. Chloe's evenings were a blur of chores and bedtime stories. She would sit on the edge of Lily's bed, brushing her daughter's hair and answering the inevitable questions about their family. "Mommy, do I have a daddy?" Lily's innocent voice would pierce through Chloe's defenses. Each time she would take a deep breath, trying to find the words that wouldn't shatter her child's world. "You have me, sweetheart," she'd say softly, kissing Lily's forehead, while her heart broke a little more. Nathan's nights, in contrast, were solitary and sterile. He would pour himself a glass of expensive whiskey, sit by the window and let the city lights blur into the background. His mind often wandered back to Chloe, to the home they had shared, and to the life they might have had together. He would push the thoughts away, drowning them in work and achievements, but they always resurfaced, stronger and more persistent each time. On weekends, Chloe and Lily would visit the park, their favorite escape from the grind of daily life. Chloe would watch as Lily chased butterflies and climbed the jungle gym, her laughter echoing through the air. It was moments like these that gave Chloe strength, reminding her why she had fought so hard to create a safe and loving environment. But even in the warmth of the sunlit park, a shadow of what could have been loomed in Chloe's mind. Nathan attended gala dinners and networking events, his presence commanding the room. Cameras flashed as he shook hands with dignitaries and posed with celebrities. To the world, he was the epitome of success, but behind the charming smile was a man who couldn't shake the feeling that something vital was missing. His heart ached with questions he refused to acknowledge, his pride keeping him from confronting the truth. One evening, as Chloe sat at the kitchen table balancing bills, Lily appeared with a crayon drawing in hand. "Look, Mommy, it's our family," she exclaimed. Chloe's heart sank as she saw the picture, a stick figure of herself, a bright and happy Lily, and an empty space labeled Daddy. Chloe forced a smile and hugged her daughter tightly, whispering, "It's beautiful, sweetheart." But as Lily ran off to play, Chloe stared at the drawing, tears welling up in her eyes. Nathan found himself scrolling through old photos one night, his finger pausing on a picture of Chloe laughing at the beach. Her hair was windswept, her eyes alive with joy. It was a version of her he hadn't seen in years, and the memory hit him like a wave. He closed the album abruptly, angered by the emotions stirring within him. "It's in the past," he muttered, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince himself or the empty room. The parallel lives of Chloe and Nathan unfolded, one filled with love and struggle, the other with success and emptiness. Both were haunted by the choices they had made, their separate paths marked by what they had lost. While Chloe focused on building a future for Lily, Nathan buried himself in a world that felt increasingly hollow. Their stories ran side by side, destined to collide again, though neither of them could see it yet. Chloe fell asleep that night with Lily's drawing on the bedside table, a bittersweet reminder of the family she had always dreamed of giving her daughter. Nathan, miles away, stared out at the city skyline, his heart heavy with questions he refused to answer. Unbeknownst to them, their fates were on a collision course, and the quiet lives they had built were about to be upended. Nathan sat in his office late one evening, the warm light of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the polished surface. Stacked contracts and unread emails surrounded him, yet his focus was elsewhere. A plain envelope lay in the center of the desk, its contents still fresh in his mind. The photo inside was of a little girl, no older than 7, with bright eyes and a smile that struck a chord deep within him. For days he had avoided thinking about it, but now the weight of the image was unbearable. The resemblance was undeniable, and the accompanying note, "Do you see yourself in her?" left no room for dismissal. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare moment of vulnerability slipping through his otherwise composed demeanor. Across town, Chloe was tucking Lily into bed after a long day. Lily had spent the afternoon carefully crafting another family drawing, proudly presenting it to Chloe just before bedtime. This one included more details: her stuffed rabbit, a small heart between Chloe and Lily, and an empty space outlined faintly where Daddy was meant to be. Chloe hugged her daughter tightly, her heart aching with a mixture of pride and sadness. As she kissed Lily goodnight, she whispered, "You're my everything, baby girl." But as she turned off the light and closed the door, her chest tightened at the thought of the unanswered questions Lily would one day demand to know. The photo remained on Nathan's desk, a challenge he could no longer ignore. He called his assistant, instructing her to dig up any public records about Chloe Harper, a task she accepted without hesitation. Nathan felt a mix of anticipation and dread. He wasn't sure what he would find, or if he was even ready to face it. Deep down, however, he knew there was no going back now. This child in the photograph wasn't just a coincidence. She was a piece of a puzzle he had left unsolved for years. The next morning, Chloe prepared for the day ahead, her schedule packed with work and errands. Lily bounced around the apartment, humming a tune she had learned at school. Chloe smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm, but couldn't shake the sense of unease that had been lingering for weeks. It was as if some unseen force was pulling at the carefully constructed life she had built. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on getting Lily ready for her art showcase that evening. A small community event Chloe had helped organize. Nathan's assistant returned with the information he had requested. Chloe Harper was listed as the lead organizer of a community arts program. Attached to the report was a flyer for the upcoming showcase, featuring local children's artwork and performances. Nathan stared at the flyer, his pulse quickening. The timing felt almost surreal. That evening, Chloe and Lily would be in a place he could easily access, a setting that wouldn't feel out of place for him to attend. He wrestled with the decision, wondering if he had the right to interfere in their lives after all this time. As Chloe arrived at the venue, she felt a mix of pride and nervousness. Lily was brimming with excitement, holding her artwork close as they entered the small but brightly lit community center. Parents and children milled about, chatting and admiring the displays. Chloe greeted familiar faces, grateful for the sense of belonging this community had given her and Lily. She helped her daughter set up her artwork, watching as Lily explained the meaning behind her pieces to anyone who stopped to listen. Meanwhile, Nathan drove to the venue, gripping the steering wheel tightly as doubts swirled in his mind. He hadn't prepared for what he might say or how Chloe would react. He only knew he needed to see for himself, to confirm the truth he could no longer deny. As he parked outside, the sight of families and children filing into the center tugged at something in his chest, a longing he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Inside, Chloe stood by Lily's side, beaming with pride, as her daughter introduced her artwork to a small group of onlookers, but her smile faltered as she glanced toward the entrance and saw him. Nathan stood frozen in the doorway, his presence a stark contrast to the warmth of the room. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to fall away. Chloe's heart raced, a mix of anger and fear surging through her. She tightened her grip on Lily's hand, her instinct to protect taking over. Nathan took a tentative step inside, scanning the room until his gaze settled on Lily. His breath hitched as he took in the sight of the little girl who so closely resembled him. She was explaining her artwork with animated gestures, her innocence and enthusiasm captivating. He had no doubt now, this was his daughter. But the realization only deepened the ache in his chest as the years of absence and missed milestones came crashing down on him. Chloe's mind raced as Nathan approached, his steps slow and deliberate. Her first instinct was to leave, to shield Lily from whatever storm he might bring. But a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her that this moment was inevitable. She squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever was coming. Lily, oblivious to the tension, continued chatting happily, her laughter ringing out in stark contrast to the heaviness between her parents. Nathan stopped a few feet away, his eyes locked on Chloe. "I didn't come here to cause a scene," he said quietly, his voice carrying a sincerity she hadn't heard in years. I needed to see her." Chloe's lips tightened, her emotions warring within her. She wanted to yell, to demand why he thought he had any right to be here, but the sight of his vulnerability gave her pause. For the first time, she saw cracks in his otherwise impenetrable facade. As the night unfolded, the tension between Chloe and Nathan simmered beneath the surface. Lily remained blissfully unaware, her joy and innocence the only constant in the room. But the inevitability of the confrontation hung heavy in the air, a storm waiting to break. Chloe knew this was just the beginning, the first step in a path that would lead to truths long buried and emotions long suppressed. Nathan stood near the entrance, his heartbeat hammering in his chest as he watched Lily animatedly describe her artwork to a group of admiring parents. He hadn't expected to feel this overwhelmed. Seeing her in person for the first time brought a tidal wave of emotions he wasn't prepared for. Her bright eyes, the curve of her smile, it was like looking into a mirror of his past self. He felt a sharp pang of regret, a deep ache for all the moments he had missed. Every milestone, every laugh, every scraped knee, he hadn't been there. Chloe caught sight of Nathan inching closer, his hesitation palpable. She felt her stomach churn. The last thing she had expected tonight was for him to show up uninvited, bringing with him the storm of their unresolved past. Her protective instincts kicked in, and she placed herself subtly between Lily and him. Her eyes narrowed as she watched him, trying to read his intentions. Was he here to make amends, or would he tear apart the life she had fought so hard to build? Lily, oblivious to the tension building between her parents, continued explaining her art to anyone who would listen. Chloe's heart ached as she watched her daughter's innocent joy. It wasn't fair for Lily to be caught in the middle of this. Whatever Nathan wanted, Chloe resolved to keep her daughter shielded from any pain he might bring. But as Nathan approached, the years of buried anger and heartbreak bubbled dangerously close to the surface. Nathan stopped just short of where Chloe stood. Their eyes met, a collision of anger, guilt, and unspoken words. "Chloe," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. She cut him off with a sharp whisper, her tone laced with fury. "What are you doing here, Nathan? How dare you come into her life like this without warning?" Her words were a shield, but Nathan saw the flicker of fear behind them, the fear of losing the control she had fought so hard to maintain. "I had to see her," Nathan replied, his voice steady but pained. He glanced at Lily, who was now pointing excitedly at one of her paintings. I had to know. Chloe clenched her fists at her sides, her heart pounding in her chest. You don't get to do this. You don't get to waltz back in and pretend to care after all these years, she hissed, her voice trembling. Where were you when she was born, when she cried for her father? Nathan's expression twisted with guilt. I didn't know, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I didn't know, Chloe. If I had... Chloe shook her head, cutting him off again. But you didn't want to know, did you? You signed those papers and walked away without a second glance. Her words hit him like a slap, the truth undeniable. He had chosen to walk away, and now he was facing the consequences of that choice. Lily turned toward them, her curiosity piqued by the hushed conversation. She tugged at Chloe's sleeve. Mommy, who is that man? She asked, her voice bright and innocent. Chloe froze, her mind racing for an answer. Nathan knelt down to Lily's eye level, his heart pounding as he struggled to find the words. Hi, Lily, he said gently, his voice trembling. I'm someone who should have been here a long time ago. Chloe's breath caught in her throat as Lily looked up at her, confusion clouding her bright eyes. Mommy? Lily asked again, her gaze bouncing between her mother and Nathan. Chloe dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around her daughter. Sweetheart, she began, her voice trembling, this is a very complicated story, but no matter what, you have me. Always. Tears welled in her eyes as she tried to hold herself together. Nathan's heart shattered at the sight of Chloe's vulnerability and Lily's confusion. He had caused this. He had left Chloe to carry this burden alone, and now he was here, trying to make sense of the wreckage he had left behind. I don't want to hurt her, he said softly, looking at Chloe. I want a chance to know her, to be there for her. Chloe looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. You don't get to just want it now, Nathan. Being a father is more than showing up when it's convenient for you. Her voice cracked with emotion, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The weight of the years they had spent apart hung heavily between them, a silent testament to the choices they had made. As the night continued around them, the three of them remained in their small bubble of tension and raw emotion. Lily clung to Chloe, sensing the gravity of the situation but not fully understanding it. Nathan stayed kneeling, his gaze fixed on the daughter he had missed and the woman he had wronged. In that moment, the only thing clear was that nothing would ever be the same again. The air between them grew heavier as Chloe pulled Lily closer, shielding her from the tidal wave of emotions that threatened to engulf them all. Nathan remained on his knees, his eyes fixed on Lily, who stared back at him with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. Chloe's thoughts raced, trying to untangle the knots of anger, fear, and protectiveness surging within her. She had prepared herself for the day Lily might ask about her father, but never imagined it would happen like this, with Nathan right in front of them, pleading with his presence alone. Lily, ever perceptive despite her young age, turned her gaze back to Chloe. Mommy, why is he looking at me like that? She asked innocently. Chloe hesitated, her throat tightening as she tried to find the words that wouldn't shatter her daughter's world. Before she could speak, Nathan's voice broke through the silence, soft but steady. Because you're incredible, Lily, he said, his tone carrying a mixture of awe and heartbreak. And I've missed so much already. Chloe's heart twisted at his words, a part of her wanting to scream at him for daring to say such things after all these years. Yet, another part, the part still tethered to the man she had once loved, sensed the sincerity in his voice. Lily's brow furrowed as she tried to make sense of the situation. Missed what? She asked, her small hands clutching Chloe's arm. The weight of the moment pressed down on Chloe, and for the first time in years, she felt utterly unprepared. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph that had led him here. He held it out for Lily to see, his hand trembling slightly. This, he said, his voice faltering, this picture of you is what brought me here. I saw it, and I knew I had to find you. Lily tilted her head, studying the photo with a child's innocent curiosity. But how did you get it? She asked. Her simple question carried a profound weight, one that neither Chloe nor Nathan was ready to answer. Chloe's resolve finally snapped. Rising to her feet, she gestured for Nathan to follow her to a quieter corner of the room, away from the watchful eyes of the other parents. "Stay here, sweetheart," she whispered to Lily, her voice calm despite the storm raging inside her. Turning to Nathan, she hissed, "You don't get to walk in here and drop that on her. Do you even realize what you're doing to her, to us?" Her eyes burned with unshed tears, and her voice cracked under the strain of holding herself together. Nathan stood, his face etched with remorse. "I know I'm late, Chloe. I know I don't deserve an easy way in, but she's my daughter too. I can't just walk away now that I know," he said, his voice raw with emotion. Chloe shook her head, her hands trembling at her sides. "You don't even know her, Nathan. You don't know her favorite stories, her silly songs, the way she dances when she thinks no one is watching. You missed everything." Her words landed like blows, but Nathan stood firm, his gaze steady. "Then let me start now," he said quietly. Their conversation was interrupted by Lily's small voice calling out from across the room. "Mommy, are you okay?" Chloe turned to see her daughter watching them with wide, worried eyes. She felt her chest tighten as she forced a smile and waved. "We're fine, sweetheart," she said, though her voice betrayed her struggle. Nathan watched the exchange, his heart aching with the realization of how much he had lost and how much he still stood to lose. As they returned to Lily's side, Chloe felt a sense of resignation settle over her. She couldn't erase Nathan from Lily's life now, not after tonight. The questions would only grow and the truth would eventually demand to be told, yet the thought of letting Nathan into their world terrified her. She glanced at him, searching his face for signs of the man she had once known, the man she had trusted before everything fell apart. Lily looked up at Nathan, her innocence cutting through the tension like a beacon of light. "Are you going to stay, or are you leaving again?" she asked bluntly, her words sending a shockwave through both adults. Nathan's breath caught, and for a moment he couldn't speak. Finally, he knelt once more, his eyes level with hers. "If you'll let me, I want to stay," he said softly. "I want to know you, Lily. I want to be here for you." Chloe's defenses wavered as she watched the exchange. She had spent years building walls to protect herself and Lily from the pain of Nathan's absence, but seeing him now, vulnerable, sincere and visibly broken, cracked those walls just enough to let doubt seep in. Could he really change? Could he be the father Lily deserved? Chloe didn't know the answers, but for the first time, she felt the weight of the decision resting squarely on her shoulders. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Chloe lingered by the door, watching Nathan say goodbye to Lily. Her daughter's laughter rang out as he promised to visit again, a sound that filled Chloe with equal parts hope and fear. She knew this was only the beginning, a fragile first step on a path fraught with uncertainty. But for Lily's sake, and perhaps for her own, she resolved to see where it might lead. Nathan sat at the edge of the park bench, watching Lily chase after a butterfly that fluttered just out of reach. The late afternoon sun bathed the park in golden light, casting long shadows across the grass. Chloe stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, observing the scene with cautious eyes. It had been weeks since their tense encounter at the community center, and though she still wrestled with doubt, Nathan's persistence had been steady. Each day he showed up, whether for a school pickup, a shared meal, or simply a walk in the park, and with every moment the walls Chloe had built around her heart began to weaken. Lily's laughter echoed through the park, a sound that never failed to bring a smile to Nathan's face. He had spent the past weeks learning the nuances of his daughter's personality, her love for drawing, her endless curiosity, and the way she insisted on naming every stray cat they passed. Each detail, no matter how small, felt like a treasure he had been denied for far too long, and yet he knew he was still earning his place. For every shared laugh, there was still the weight of years he couldn't reclaim, milestones he hadn't witnessed. Chloe watched Nathan interact with Lily, her emotions a tangled web of hope and fear. He was different now, she admitted silently. The arrogant, work-obsessed man she had divorced seemed like a ghost compared to the father who now knelt in the grass, helping Lily examine a fallen leaf. But could this change last? Was it enough to risk letting him back into their lives fully? She had spent so long guarding her heart and protecting Lily that the idea of trusting him again felt both liberating and terrifying. Nathan stood and walked over to Chloe, his expression calm but earnest. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his sincerity. Chloe tilted her head, confused. "For what?" she asked. He gestured toward Lily, who was now trying to climb a tree. "For giving me this chance. For not slamming the door in my face, even though I probably deserved it." Chloe's lips twitched in a faint smile, but her eyes remained guarded. "You're still on probation," she replied, her tone half teasing, half serious. As the weeks turned into months, Nathan became a steady presence in their lives. He joined Chloe and Lily for simple dinners, attended Lily's school events, and even began to repair his relationship with Chloe in small but meaningful ways. One evening, as they sat together on the couch while Lily colored nearby, Nathan looked at Chloe and said, "I know I've missed so much, but I want to make up for it, however long it takes." Chloe met his gaze, her defenses softening. "You're doing a good job so far," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily, oblivious to the complexities of her parents' emotions, thrived in the newfound stability. She loved having her dad around, and Nathan cherished every moment he spent with her. One evening, as he tucked her into bed, she looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes and asked, "Are you staying for good, Daddy?" The word hit Nathan like a wave. He had waited so long to hear it. "Yes, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For as long as you'll let me." Chloe, standing in the doorway, watched the exchange with tears in her eyes. For so long she had carried the burden of being Lily's everything, and now, for the first time, she felt like she could share that weight. It was a relief she hadn't expected, and yet it scared her. Letting Nathan in meant risking her heart again, but watching him with Lily made her believe it might be worth it. The three of them began to build a new rhythm, one marked by laughter, shared meals, and quiet moments of connection. They weren't perfect, but they were trying, and that effort was enough. One Saturday, as they walked through the park together, Lily ran ahead, her laughter ringing out. Nathan reached for Chloe's hand, and for the first time she didn't pull away. She looked up at him, her smile hesitant but real. "Maybe we'll figure this out after all," she said softly. Nathan squeezed her hand, his own smile filled with hope. "I think we already are," he replied. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of them sat on a picnic blanket, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. Lily snuggled between them, her head resting on Nathan's arm. Chloe glanced at Nathan, the quiet peace of the moment settling over her. For the first time in years, she felt like they had a real chance, a chance to heal, to grow, and to become something better than they had been before. This story is a reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal with time, effort, and love. If this journey moved you, if it made you believe in second chances and the power of family, don't forget to support us by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it, and stay tuned for more tales that inspire, touch the heart, and remind us of the beauty of life's unexpected turns. See you in the next story.